Liam and his father, Mark, woke up that Monday like any other, but by nightfall, their quiet suburban home had become the epicenter of a week-long manhunt that would grip the entire town. The morning started like any other in the quiet suburban neighborhood, with sunlight spilling across neatly trimmed lawns and birds chirping in the trees. But beneath the surface of this peaceful community, something was already wrong. Liam, a lively 7-year-old with a love for drawing and building forts, hadn't come out of his bedroom for school. At first, neighbors thought it was normal kids occasionally slept in or got caught up in their own little worlds. But when his mother, Claire, failed to appear at work and didn't answer phone calls, concern began to grow. The unease was subtle at first, like a small ripple in still water, but it quickly spread. By mid-morning, the whirring turned into alarm. Claire's co-workers called her home repeatedly, only to be met with silence. The usually bustling house was quiet, almost unnervingly so. Concerned, they contacted the police, who arrived to find the front door unlocked. Inside, the air was stale and still, as if time had paused within the walls. The kitchen told a story of sudden departure. A half-eaten breakfast sat abandoned on the table, a chair pushed back as if someone had jumped up in a hurry. Toys and school supplies were scattered across the living room floor, a trail of normal childhood chaos frozen mid-moment. The officers began to move through the house carefully, their radios crackling as they reported their findings. There was no sign of forced entry, no evidence of a struggle, and nothing to suggest that anyone had broken in. The atmosphere in the home was eerie, amplified by the silence that seemed to hang over every room. In Liam's bedroom, the small bed was made neatly, and the desk was covered with drawings, bright, cheerful pictures that now felt incongruously out of place. It was as if life had been interrupted abruptly, leaving behind a snapshot of a normal morning that now felt unsettlingly empty. Outside, neighbors had begun to gather, speaking in hushed tones. Some mentioned seeing Claire leave the house the previous day looking stressed, while others remembered Mark, Liam's father, leaving late at night in his car, returning hours later with no explanation. Nobody had seen him since early that morning, and questions started to multiply faster than answers. Where was he? Where was Liam? And most importantly, were they in danger? The police set up a perimeter and began their initial investigation, knocking on doors, taking statements, and checking surveillance footage from nearby homes and businesses. Every detail mattered, every small observation could be a piece of the puzzle. The sense of urgency grew as hours passed with no sign of the boy or his father. Social media feeds lit up with worried neighbors sharing photos of Liam, hoping that someone, somewhere, might have seen him. The situation was no longer just a local concern. It began to feel like a crisis, one that required immediate action. By the time the sun began to set, the initial search had expanded. Officers combed the neighborhood, calling out names, checking parks and nearby streets. Volunteers started to join, offering flashlights and helping to cover areas the police couldn't immediately reach. Every shadow seemed suspicious, every car passing by caught attention. And still, there was no sign of Mark or Liam. The tension was palpable, a mix of fear and anticipation that set the stage for what would become a week-long search, one that would test the limits of the community's patience and resilience. The quiet, ordinary morning had shifted dramatically into a night filled with worrying and unanswered questions. The disappearance of Liam and the absence of his father marked the beginning of a mystery that would grip the town, sparking fear, speculation, and a desperate hope that they would be found safe. The calm suburban streets now felt charged with uncertainty, and the search for answers was just beginning. The manhunt began almost immediately after the initial report. Authorities moved quickly, treating Mark as a person of interest and assuming that his disappearance was directly connected to Liam's. His car had vanished from the driveway, and neighbors recalled seeing him leave late at night, carrying what looked like a duffel bag. Each lead added to the sense of urgency, and police knew that time was critical. The first step was to canvass the neighborhood, door to door, speaking with residents, gathering any detail no matter how small. A single observation, a fleeting glimpse, or a passing comment could make all the difference. Within hours, the search expanded beyond the neighborhood. Police reviewed security footage from nearby streets, gas stations, and convenience stores. Every camera was a potential clue. Footage showed Mark's car leaving the area, moving south along the main highway, but after a certain point, the trail went cold. Detectives worked through the night, tracking cell phone signals, attempting to triangulate locations, and calling in additional units to cover more ground. The entire town became involved in the search in some way, whether by volunteering, sharing information on social media, or simply keeping an eye out. Fear and speculation spread quickly, and the atmosphere was tense as neighbors whispered about what might have happened. Rumors began to circulate almost immediately. Some believed Mark had taken Liam on purpose, attempting to escape some personal crisis. Others worried that he had acted irrationally, leaving the child in danger. Social media amplified every theory, and people shared photos, descriptions, and speculative stories. The local news picked up the case, and soon the story reached regional audiences. The public's involvement, while well-meaning, added pressure to the investigation. Each new tip had to be verified carefully, yet police were acutely aware that every arm mattered. Teams were dispatched to search surrounding forests, rivers, and abandoned buildings. Drones flew overhead, scanning the area from above, while K-9 units tracked possible scents through fields and wooded trails. Volunteers and family members helped coordinate, leaving food and water in potential hiding spots. Every search led to tension and anticipation, yet frustration mounted with every dead end. The town's normally calm streets now felt charged, as if the disappearance had changed the rhythm of daily life. Streetlights were watched more closely, shadows seemed longer, and the simple act of leaving home became an uneasy experience. Meanwhile, investigators dug into Mark's past, looking for patterns that might explain his behavior. Friends and acquaintances described him as unpredictable at times, with a history of impulsive decisions. Nothing suggested outright violence, but the focus was on understanding how a parent could vanish with a child. Police discovered minor incidents of neglect, overdue bills, and periods when Liam's welfare had been overlooked, but nothing criminal had been reported. Still, these findings painted a troubling picture and fueled the urgency of the search. By the second day, the manhunt had transformed into a full-scale operation. Every lead, whether confirmed or speculative, was pursued with relentless energy. Teams coordinated across counties, communicating in real time as new information arrived. The pressure was immense, both for the authorities and for the community. Families with children grew more protective, neighbors watched more closely, and the town collectively held its breath. As the hours turned in 2 days, hope mingled with fear. The search for Mark and Liam was no longer just a police operation. It had become the central concern of an entire community, each moment heavy with anticipation, each sighting or clue carrying the possibility of a breakthrough or disappointment. By the third day, the trail had begun to grow colder and the urgency of the search intensified. The police had tracked Mark's car to a gas station 50 miles from the neighborhood, abandoned with the keys still inside. Inside the vehicle, Liam's backpack sat on the passenger seat, worn but intact, suggesting the boy had been with his father at some point. Despite the discovery, there were no signs of struggle or violence, and no additional clues pointing to where the two might have gone next. Investigators combed through every detail, piecing together movements, trying to establish a timeline, but each lead seemed to dissolve into uncertainty. Detectives turned their focus inward, re-examining the family's history. They learned that Mark had a pattern of irresponsibility, marked by frequent absences and a lack of involvement in daily parenting. There were reports of overdue bills, missed school meetings, and periods when Liam had been left in the care of neighbors or friends for extended stretches. Nothing in the past suggested criminal intent, but when combined with the current disappearance, it painted a worrying picture. Investigators began to consider the possibility that Liam's safety might not have been deliberately threatened, but instead jeopardized through carelessness, poor planning, or desperation. As hours turned into days, the tension in the community grew. Every small clue was magnified. Security footage, anonymous tips, and sightings were scrutinized repeatedly. Officers interviewed anyone who might have seen Mark or Liam, revisiting statements and checking inconsistencies. Some neighbors reported glimpses of a man matching Mark's description near convenience stores or along highways. Others claimed to have seen a child who could have been Liam. Each tip was followed, yet all ended in dead ends, leaving frustration and anxiety in its wake. During this period, authorities began to notice patterns in Mark's behavior. He seemed to be deliberately avoiding areas with heavy police presence and might have been using familiar rural paths to stay hidden. Investigators discovered that he had previously spent time in nearby wooded areas, which could have served as temporary refuge. Officers retraced his steps, scouting abandoned cabins, riverbanks, and forested trails. Even as the search widened, every moment without progress deepened the concern for Liam. Families in the town grew increasingly protective, and social media continued to buzz with speculation and worrying. Amid the uncertainty, the police began preparing for all possibilities. They coordinated with neighboring counties, mobilized more canine units, and set up checkpoints along main highways. Each unit had precise instructions to be on alert for any signs of the father or son. Despite the frustration of dead ends, the investigation slowly began to reveal the gravity of Mark's negligence. While he had not intended to harm his child, his erratic behavior and failure to take responsible action had created a dangerous situation, one that could have escalated at any moment. By the end of the third day, the search had become as much about prevention as recovery. The community remained on edge, caught between hope and fear. Families watched the news closely, checking in with neighbors and each other. The story of Mark and Liam had captured attention far beyond the neighborhood, and the question everyone wanted answered was the same: where were they, and would the boy be found safe? The trail might have grown cold, but the determination of law enforcement and the vigilance of the community ensured that the search would continue relentlessly. On the sixth day, a breakthrough came in the most unexpected way. A local hiker, familiar with the dense forest on the outskirts of town, reported seeing a man who matched Mark's description near a secluded cabin deep in the woods. The police immediately mobilized, sending multiple units to the area with urgency. Every officer knew that this could be the turning point of the investigation. As they approached, the cabin appeared abandoned, with no one in sight. The area surrounding it showed signs of recent activity: footprints, discarded food wrappers, and a small fire pit that had clearly been used in the past few days. Investigators realized that Mark had been using this location as a temporary hideout, carefully avoiding detection while remaining close enough to navigate back towards civilization when necessary. The search around the cabin intensified. Officers scoured nearby trails, checked streams, and examined every possible hiding spot. The air was thick with anticipation, each step forward carrying a mix of hope and dread. It was then that a local farmer, making his usual rounds along a winding trail near the woods, spotted a small figure walking aimlessly. As he approached, he realized it was Liam, disoriented and exhausted but unharmed. Relief washed over the officers and volunteers when the farmer guided the boy to safety. Liam's clothes were dirty, his shoes scuffed from wandering, but his spirit remained intact. He had survived days of uncertainty, a testament to both luck and resilience. Once Liam was brought to the authorities, medical personnel conducted thorough examinations. Though physically unharmed, the boy was understandably shaken and confused. He recalled fragments of the past days, brief memories of being hidden in the woods, following his father through narrow trails, and waiting in the cabin. His account was patchy, but it confirmed that Mark had been intentionally avoiding detection, taking care to keep his son hidden without causing direct harm. The cabin, investigators noted, had been set up with minimal supplies, a few blankets, packaged food, and a rudimentary sleeping area. It was clearly improvised, not meant for comfort, but it had served as temporary shelter during the week-long ordeal. The discovery of Liam shifted the focus of the investigation. While the immediate danger to the boy had passed, authorities knew that Mark was still at large and potentially unpredictable. Surveillance was increased around key areas, and additional officers were deployed to nearby towns and highways to prevent further movement. Investigators also began compiling more details about the cabin and its surroundings, noting how Mark had used the terrain to his advantage, taking advantage of isolated paths and dense undergrowth. As the hours passed, the story of the boy found wandering in the woods spread quickly through the community. Relief mixed with lingering concern as residents reflected on how a week of fear could have turned so dangerous. Authorities emphasized the importance of vigilance and the fragility of child safety in situations of parental neglect. The recovery of Liam marked a critical moment in the case, providing a sense of closure to a harrowing chapter while intensifying the urgency to locate his father. The stage was set for the final confrontation as the police now had a clearer understanding of Mark's movements and intentions, preparing to bring the week-long manhunt to its inevitable conclusion. Mark was found less than 24 hours after Liam's recovery, hiding in a small rental property on the outskirts of a neighboring county. He had attempted to stay under the radar, changing clothes and avoiding any location that might draw attention. When officers arrived, he offered no resistance, appearing fatigued and aware that his week-long attempt to evade the law had come to an end. His capture brought immediate relief to investigators and the community, who had spent days fearing the worst for both the boy and his father. Once in custody, Mark was questioned about his actions, though he offered little clarity. It became apparent that his intentions had been more about avoiding responsibility than inflicting direct harm. Investigators discovered that he had spent the week moving between rural areas, taking care to avoid roads and populated regions. The cabin in the woods where Liam had been found was one of several temporary locations Mark had considered, though it appeared he had relied on only a few due to the boy's discomfort and his own increasing fatigue. Every step he took highlighted a pattern of neglect and poor judgment, yet thankfully no violent acts had occurred. The legal proceedings began quickly. Mark faced charges of child endangerment and neglect, reflecting the serious risk his behavior had posed. Authorities emphasized that while the boy had survived physically unharmed, the psychological and emotional impact of the ordeal could be long-lasting. During the investigation, officials compiled records showing Mark's repeated irresponsibility over time. Missed obligations, periods of absentee parenting, and failure to provide adequate care formed a troubling history that contextualized the week-long disappearance. It became clear that the crisis had been the result of negligence compounded by poor decision-making under stress rather than deliberate malice. In the aftermath, the community grappled with mixed emotions. Relief at Liam's safety was tempered by anger and disbelief that such a situation could unfold in a seemingly peaceful neighborhood. Families began to re-examine their own routines and the safety of their children, while local authorities reinforced the importance of vigilance and communication. Social workers and child welfare professionals became involved, ensuring that Liam received ongoing care and support to recover from the uncertainty and fear he had endured. The case also prompted broader discussions about the warning signs of parental neglect and the importance of early intervention to prevent similar crises. Liam was placed in the care of his extended family, who provided a stable environment where he could regain a sense of normalcy. His return to school and social activities was gradual, with attention paid to his emotional well-being. Community members continued to check in, offering support and reassurance. The story of his disappearance and rescue remained a cautionary tale, a reminder of how quickly negligence could escalate into a crisis and the vital role that community awareness and coordinated response play in ensuring child safety. As weeks passed, the manhunt became a case study for law enforcement on managing search operations, coordinating resources, and understanding the behavioral patterns of individuals who might endanger children through neglect. For the town, the events left an indelible mark, changing how neighbors interacted and how families approached responsibility. The story closed with Liam safe and Mark held accountable, a resolution that brought relief but also served as a sobering reminder of the fragility of safety and the consequences of poor decisions.